I just gotta let you know that you've been so good to me. And I know that I can't do it by myself. I need your love so desperately. It's been times I wanted to give up, but your words, they spoke to me. Fill my spirit, help me to believe, but sometimes I still get weak.
I need you to fill me up, until I overflow, the keeper of my way. I need you to fill me up, I need your love always, so I won't go astray, the keeper of my way. I know you know my thoughts, I know you know my flaws. Your love fills up every empty part of me that was hiding for so long. The love of my life, now I've evolved. I wanna be what you want, and by your strength I'll break down every wall. I need you to fill me up, until I overflow, the keeper of my way, the keeper of my way. I need you to fill me up, I need you, I need your love always, so I won't go astray, the keeper of my way. Can I get a witness? If you hear me say, if you feel me say,
If you feel me, say yeah, 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 yeah. Let me hear you say yeah, 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 yeah.
I need you to fill me up, until I overflow, the keeper of my way.
Keeper of my way.
I need you to fill
Shalom, Israel. Great to have you here tonight. Got a message for you guys. Got some history for you tonight by our brother Aman. I'm Ra'aya, by the way. It's hot in here, so you can leave it open.
And we are going to get it in with another Wednesday to do world history presented to you by, True Nation and the family and such. Tonight, we're going into, as the lesson says, Japheth, their descendants, and their religions. So we started a kind of recent segment where we're going into the sons of Noah, and kind of explaining who they were in biblical text, trying to figure out who they are in today's world and terms, as well as modern history, who they were, and the relevance and relation to us as Israel today, historically, and how they're going to play, hopefully we touch upon, in prophecy that at this point in time, 21st century and very far in it, how that's going to play out. So how these particular descendants of Japheth, how they play out in the scriptures in many of ways. So the best place I feel we can start with is getting, the beginning of things as those that don't know where they're mentioned in scripture. So we can get the book of Genesis chapter 10. And we're going to read at, we'll read from verse 1. Genesis 10 and 1. So we'll just get you the general backdrop again on this son named Japheth.
Genesis chapter 10, verse 1. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood.
So you got to know that at this point in time in scriptures, there is no one else on the earth other than the descendants of Noah, which includes his sons and their wives. Japheth is the one, of course, of key. So verse 2, getting right into that.
Verse 2, the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tyrus.
Come on. You can keep reading.
And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Rimpath, and Togarmah.
Mm-hmm.
And the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodadim.
Come on. Verse 5.
Mm-hmm.
You can read verse 5 too.
Verse 5.
Come on.
By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nations.
Come on. So you got 4 verses, going into the 3 main sons, which were, beginning at Gomer, Magog, and Madai, and then going into, Javan and the rest. Probably the most prominent sons that play out by name in the scriptures, as people will figure out and know, are going to be Magog, Javan, and I would say, Ashkenaz. And we're going to get into Ashkenaz hopefully later on as the lesson progresses. But again, Magog, Gog, Javan, and Ashkenaz. These are some of the more prominent tribes and descendants in the scriptures that are descendants of Japheth, because we have many accounts where we would have interactions with them. Again, it says that by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands. So we got to understand. One thing, and hopefully, in a short minute, we can show you some pictures. But when it's talking about the isles, you got to understand the point of reference that we're talking about here. So, as we know, the Most High divided the nations their inheritance. He gave, he gave Israel in time soon to come his particular inheritance, but as well as he gave all other nations their inheritance. We can actually get that quickly in Deuteronomy. We'll go to chapter 30. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 7. You could read that so I get people to understand.
Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 7. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee. Thy elders, and they will tell thee.
And that's what we're doing right now, using, sources of collected resources like archaeology and such. We're trying to dig into the history of not only our forefathers, but how our forefathers related to the rest of the nations on the earth, as far as this lesson is concerned. Read on.
Verse 8. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel.
So that's the point I wanted to mainly drive. Japheth had his particular region that he was given. There's a chart that you guys can Google, and hopefully I'll show you guys this later on. It's called the Table of Nations. One of the very first beginning images is that archaeologists and scholars have put together a rendered historical image of antiquity in the Middle East, North Africa, and some of the beginning parts of what they call Asia. Not Asia as we understand it, but what might be considered Asia Minor or Europe. The European part / Asia Minor, that was dedicated to, for the most part in the beginning, the descendants of Japheth. And you got to understand something about the name of Japheth, too. They explains it right. Well, you know what? We'll probably get to that later, but I'll tell you right now. Japheth literally means, in the Hebrew, enlarged. So you got to understand this is the territory and how large Japheth really was. He had all the way from Western Europe, even, including countries like Ireland in antiquity, all the way to Asia, like literally Asia, Central Asia, where China is today. All that north beginning region, covering again that from Russia, China to Ireland and England, those were all soon to become the territory of all the descendants of Japheth. Because right now, we only read probably at this point in time in Genesis 10, speaking on maybe 3 or 4 generations. Obviously, stuff had expanded from then on, and we're going to get to some more, thank you, we're going to get to some more key scriptural kingdoms that we dealt with that were Japheth. And just a side note to put in, I feel like most scholars know, they know these things, but a lot of Israel that is waking up today, they don't really know too much about Japheth. And it's important to know these things because, again, it plays out in discernment with other nations and such like that, and again with prophecy, and just to really bring the scriptures and color to life. Because again, these people still walk on this earth today. You probably pass them at least 1 or 2 hours in your day. You're running into a descendant of Japheth. You probably don't even know that. But anyway, it's important for us to know these things. So again, back to my point. When it's talking about these were the isles of the Gentiles divided, these isles are specifically referencing the islands of the Mediterranean, where Greece is, where the Roman Peninsula is, and all the other little islands, that float around there, even unto Spain. Those are and were the land territories of Japheth. In particular, Javan. Javan is known to be the actual descendants of the Greeks, the Greek people. And that plays into history that we have in the book of Maccabees. We'll touch on that a little bit later. We're just kind of building up on things right now. So these are the isles that it's talking about in reference to Israel, because Israel wasn't really, dealing with too much people that weren't really in close proximity. Sometimes you have some mixtures in the scriptures, but usually it's prophecies that the Most High is talking about and just things that are going to come to pass. But as far as dealing with, Israel in the flesh, we mainly, as far as dealt with Japheth, with the Greeks, Javan. Tubal, one of the other islands that was around Javan as well too. And as we're going to get into it, Gog and Magog as far as prophecy is going to concern. So that's what we're speaking about right now when we, talk about Japheth. We probably don't need to touch too much on this, but as you guys know, at one point in time, Tower of Babel point in time, everyone knew the same language. Everyone got then spread out by the Most High. The Most High divided our languages and, continued to further divide us, like he said in Deuteronomy chapter 32. So that's what it is. So now we spoke about one particular nation of people, the Greeks, Javan, and I want to mention them in detail later. I want to list some other ones. So there's a phrase that scholars, archaeologists go into. It's called Indo-European. Now, this is an important phrase because it covers what I had mentioned, the span of Europe, from Britain to mainly, guess what? India. So the Indian people, and not Native American Indians, because we can get into why they were called that by, Columbus and such, but the actual Indian people, they descend from this people. They descend from Japheth. So that's why, again, the term Indo-European is used by scholars. They notice, and we're not going to get into much detail about it, but they notice a language relation between people in India to people that lived in Europe, particularly the Greeks. There is a language commonality similarity between Greeks people and people from India, the ones that practice Hinduism, which we're going to get into the couple religions shortly as well too. But that's their collective modern term, modern term label, Indo-Europeans. That is, again, that big range. I wish I could show you guys a map right now. Matter of fact, Kanash, you can turn on your mic. Let me know when you're able to switch over to PC so I can show the people.
Go ahead.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm going to definitely do that. You can switch over to the PC right now. They can see me, do all this. So I'm going to show you guys first the Table of Nations, and I'm going to hopefully make you understand where that references today. Ooh, not Table of Nations League. My bad, y'all. Nations Bible Atlas. Walla boom. Great. So as you guys are, previewing, looking at, I'm going to show you guys, and, ooh, we don't want the website. Look at that. So that's what we're talking about. Israel in the red square box, and I'm going to show my guy Ra'aya too. Israel being there, obviously, in the red square box, and soon to come in generations, but Japheth and his sons that we read about in Genesis 10, all being, again, this isn't even the full picture. This is pretty much what the New Testament would consider Asia Minor. But if you guys can follow the cursor, you see Tarshish right here, which we'll talk about and get into. And do we see Javan right here? Javan right here. This right here, this is Greece. This is, world history Greece right here. And over here, this is Rome, the Italian peninsula. So Tarshish, the peoples of Tarshish and his descendants are actually the original peoples of Rome, sometimes known as the Latins, the Latin people. So all of this, even, past the map to Great Britain and Ireland, all the way over here past to Asia, Central Asia is all the descendants of Japheth. And Russia too. And we're going to get into Russia later on. But yeah, that's what I wanted to show you guys. So this is, again, all Indo-European territory. Modern scholars call them Indo-Europeans because they have a familiar language that they share from antiquity to today. That is big facts. So now, we're going to get into pretty much a lot of notes. We're going to get into what Josephus says. So to kind of dig deeper and emphasize this. So this is the famous Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus and Ra'aya. I'm going to have you come over here, and you're going to read through that, and we're going to break it down as we go. Tell me if it's close enough.
From the top?
Yeah.
All right.
You can read Flavius Josephus.
Flavius Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews by William Winston. Now, they are the grandchildren of Noah, in honor of whom names were imposed on the nations by those that first seized upon them. Japheth, the son of Noah, had 7 sons. They inhabited so that beginning at the mountains Taurus and Amanus, they proceeded along Asia.
So there we go again. We have Josephus being a man of Israel that came after the siege of 70 A.D. Roman imprisonment. He's writing this and recording this history so that, we have 2 sources to verify. So again, that Asia region.
They proceeded along Asia as far as the river Tansis, and along Europe to Cadiz, and settling themselves on the lands which they light upon, which none had inhabited before. They called the nations by their own names.
Come on.
For Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galatians.
Man, what do we have in the New Testament? The book of Galatians. That's talking about Israelites that were scattered among those Japhetic heathens, and doing what Japhetic people were doing, which we'll touch on. We'll read a little bit more because it's it's a little lengthy, but you guys know that it's here. So let's read a little bit more.
For Gomer founded those whom the Greeks now call Galatians, but were then called Gomerites. Javan, Shalakia, Gomermites. Magog founded those that from him were named Magongites, but who are by the Greeks called
Scythians. And what you got to know about the Scythians, at this point in time, that's what they were known as, but you got to understand Scythia is very close to Russia, and eventually those Scythian people will make up the indigenous Russian people today. So Scythians evolved to modern day Russians, just putting everything into perspective. And who did he come from? Magog. So we're going to get into that.
Now, as to Javan and Madai, the sons of Japheth, from Madai came the Medians, who are called Medes by the Greeks, but from the Javan, Ionia, and all the Grecians are derived.
So Javan or Ionia, because something about language with J's and I's, Greeks, they switch that. But the Greeks are Javan or Ionians. And then we said that Madai became the Medes. Now we're going to mention this in a little bit detail later. Who was the third captivity Israel was in after Babylon? It was the Persians and Medes. So we were in captivity by Japheth as far as the major captivities dealing with the Bible says. We were in their hands before. And even, to degrees this day. So that's who these people are. That's all I want to talk about right now, because I just wanted to mention some of the main people that people will understand, which is Japheth is your Greek people, your Persian and Mede people. I'll explain the Persian part later. And as well as the Scythians, who are Russians. These people, Europeans basically, as we would understand, in antiquity and still today. These people are Japheth. So we're gonna wait till the camera switches, but I'm gonna just close this. I'm gonna leave this window so you guys, if you guys are on at home and watching, you guys can read that more along as I speak, and we'll get back to continuing the lesson. So that was just one rather noteworthy historian who proves who Japheth is today, Josephus. There's other ones that we're not going to get into too much detail into. Another historian named Jerome goes into the history and knowledge of who Japheth is, as well as a man from Spain named Isidore of Seville. He acknowledged not only of himself, but that the original inhabitants of Spain descended from Japheth in the Bible. So he knew, a man named Isidore of Seville. Khan. All right, got you. So yeah, those are just some noteworthy historians. So we mentioned that they're considered the Indo-Europeans. We had some historians to prove that. Just some more information for you guys to know. I'm gonna give you guys another image if it has a switch. Have you guys ever heard of a swastika? Who does that remind you of? Germany, Hitler. Well, the history behind that is that, not to go too much on Hitler, but Hitler wasn't really going too far off of who he understood that he was and who he came from. He acknowledged, he called himself an Aryan because he knew that some side of him descended from, or at least, if not him, because you got to understand, we got to understand how Esau does things. Not only does Esau like to claim face of other cultures, but he tends to, without his own knowledge, sometimes hide within other cultures. You know, we have iconoclasm and all things. But for all intents and purposes, everyone understands Adolf Hitler really to be a white person, an Edomite. So we're going to just kind of play off of that and what Edomites kind of do. So Adolf Hitler, you know, acknowledges himself to be of the Aryan, you know, stock and Aryan race. You know, he does his whole persecution of the fake Jews and such like that. He's not far off from saying that because the swastika actually comes from India. The symbol of it right here, if you guys can see me circling it, where it's not tilted, but it's flat like a square box on the ground, that actually comes from who we mentioned, the Indian people, and a lot of their philosophies and practices in Hinduism and such like that. That's where that comes from. And then Hitler just adopted that to kind of, for those that knew, let it know that, hey, we are, you know, they are Indo-European people. They descend from essentially Japheth. They are different from who they were at battle with or war with, the fake Jews. And that goes into another convoluted history itself with Edomites, Japheth, and of course the identity they stole, which was ours, Israel. But that's why Hitler used this symbol, and why a lot of white people, skinheads in prison, stuff like that, mistakenly more than not use this as well too. Again, let's just touch on what the scriptures say that white people have done in antiquity and what they still do today in modern history. Let's get to the book of Genesis, and we're touching on just some of the nature of Esau, so you guys can just have some you know, a little bit of meat of understanding when you're trying to discern spirits out here. The book of Genesis. Bada boom. We're going to go to, I'm sorry, you guys, I didn't really have the precepts on hand, but we will definitely find this. Give me a second. It's a scripture where Isaac was disappointed. Oh, Khan. Genesis chapter 26 and read verse 34. Some things about Esau and what he does.
Genesis chapter 26, verse 34. And Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri, the Hittite, and Bathsheba, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, which were a grief of mine unto Isaac and to Rebekah.
So get the understanding. Esau, at one point in time in history before he actually acted out his wickedness. He was somewhat liked and acceptable by, his family, his parents, and at some point, a time even by King David and such. But one of the things that Esau does, he has no sense of, boundary, the borders of wickedness, as they say. And he goes on and disappoints his parents by marrying a woman of another nation. Now, you got to understand how important that is, because all the way from Abraham to Isaac, and of course to Jacob, it was instructed of them, by their respective parents to say, look, don't go and marry any of the people of the surrounding, land around here. Marry one of your own, one of these Shemitic peoples. Marry one of your cousins. Esau, among other things, decides not to do that. And as we've seen and read, it was a grief of mine to Isaac and to Rebekah. So you got to understand how this plays into the history with Japheth and Esau, and the Aryan Brotherhood, skinheads today, as well as the general operations that Esau does. What do we see Esau liking to do on traffic ads? He's got a lot of interracial marriages. That's what I wanted to mention. Esau is like the biggest proponent of interracial marriages, even if at one point in America he was against that, but hypocritically. It's always kind of been in him to do that thing, which is partly why, a lot of the other nations modern day are light-skinned as far as dealing with the elites, because Esau has managed through time, modern time in history, to put himself up there in the elites of all the families of the earth, by intermarrying with them and, being up there. He doesn't necessarily represent the majority when it comes to, indigenous and regular common people of Europe or, anyone else, the Chinese and such like that. It's just that the image that Esau promotes today on media and such like that is essentially, his image and those close enough to him and his echelon. So this is this is what he does. He intermarries and iconoclasts not only just Israel but other cultures too. So he's got a lot of things. A lot of things are confused and messed up just by the way that he does things. So that's why I believe it's important again to get into this message, because a lot of Europeans are either one of either Esau or still Japheth, as far as what we can understand about, people saying, go back to Europe, that's really not even where white people are from. We got to get back to the origins. But that's enough on them. We're not going to touch too much on Esau. I just wanted to mention how that relates again to the swastika and, their culture vulturing of Indo-Europeans and such like that. So let's, I guess right now, let's get some more proofs. There's a chart, another image chart I want to show you guys, and it's from a website called, I didn't click on the website. Was it part 2 or part 3? It's probably this one. So we're going to hopefully get this image that I had seen, which I thought was very, very important to mention, because it's a list showing, like in bracket form, more of the descendants of who Esau is. Wada bing. I don't think it's on this website, though. So we're going to stand by and hopefully have me find that on one of the other ones. This one. There we go. This image right here. Zoom. Cool. So we see, maybe we can even zoom in a little bit more. Let me see if I know some hacking. Great. So check this out, you guys. We made a bigger image. You guys can kind of see, and the red lines is the beginning, again, speaking of Indo-Europeans, you can come over here, Ryan. Indo-Europeans, they have it under, Proto-Indo-Europeans. They're trying to go into some ancient history as far as, dealing with the sixth day of creation when man was first created. That's kind of, the stuff that they try to promote, but they don't really have an understanding and time frame. But again, we're dealing with Indo-Europeans. So we see that it says Proto-Indo-Europeans are the progenitors of your Proto-Anatolians. So Anatolia is basically Asia Minor. A lot of the letters in the New Testament were written to letters in Asia Minor, like Galatia, Ephesus. That's pretty much close to where Anatolia is. So the Proto-Anatolians, Proto-Italo-Celtic people, that means Italians and Celtic people, the Druids, which we're going to talk in, that's their descendants. The Proto-Germanic people, again, the reason why Hitler brought up the swastika aspect, the Germanic peoples of the Holy Roman Empire, that destroyed Rome, the western part of it, were Japhetic people. The barbarians were Japheth. I mean, that was, where they originally had stayed at. This table, my brother, is called The Family Tree of the Indo-European Languages by Kees Heuser. So, this is a chart that is, connecting people by, again, language, not necessarily appearance, and of course, definitely not geography, but by familiarities in language. And even the language that we speak today, English, Latin, English, Latin, Germanic, we're actually speaking a Japhetic language by definition. Us English-speaking people, Spanish-speaking people, which comes from Latin and such like that. We're actually speaking Japheth's language to some degree. So that's how permeable that he's related to us, right now. We're, that's his language. Proto-Indo-Iranian people, Proto-Balto-Slavic people, and then it gets into more details of, after that. For instance, the Iranian people. One of the things I want to mention about the Iranian people is that there is a difference between Iran and Iraq. Not to go too much into history, but the reason why those two countries fight against each other as far as dealing within the religion of Islam is because before Islam, had control over those regions, originally the bloodline descendants was people of Iraq descended from Ishmael or Arabs, Shemitic people. The people of Iran descended from the Persian people or Japhetic people. So other than the religion of Islam that was, connecting them, they still understood and realized, Iraqis and Iranians, that they weren't the same people. So that's why, if any of you are familiar with news from the early 2000s, Iraq and Baghdad and Iran and them fighting, that's the historical reason why, dealing with the holy wars of the Crusades and the rise of Islam back in, I guess I want to say the first, not century, but in AD 1000, around that time. That's the deal with Iran. So I just wanted you guys to know that as far as the lessons are concerned. Iranian people are Japhetic people, which come from Persia and Medes. And with that being said, actually, we can actually touch into that. Let's actually get back into the Bible a little bit, since we kind of have a understanding, a foundation with just collective history. So if the camera's not on me, you can put it back on me in time, but we're going to dig into the scriptures real quick, We're going to dig into the scriptures. Let's go to, I guess we could first start with the book of Esther. We could start with the book of Esther, just get some of the world history and Bible history out of that. Let me find Esther real quick. Hold on. You got it?
Yeah, what you looking for?
It's going to be around the first chapter, from the first You can start from verse 1.
The book of Esther, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, Shalakia, and it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 127 provinces.
Oh, what did we say right here? He said from India. So India was even known in the scriptures. He reigned from India to Ethiopia. Now again, he did have an empire that took over former empires, particularly the Babylonians. So he had more, reach into territories that the Most High didn't necessarily allow Japheth. But that's what empires do. They kind of blur the boundaries. But again, India to Ethiopia, this king Ahasuerus of Persia.
That verse 2, that in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace.
Khan. And Shushan is around the Euphrates River, again, where the Medes area is at. You guys can look that up on a map yourselves because I don't have anything to show you. But that's generally, at this time, the capital of the Persians and Medes was, again, Shushan, which is close to the Euphrates River. So, of course, we're not going to go into the details of the book of Esther, but I wanted to point you guys out right here. We're dealing with Japheth right here in the book of Esther. We also deal with Japheth in Nehemiah and Ezra as far as, as far as Ezra being contracted by King Cyrus, another king of Persia, to go back to Israel. So we'll read that. Go to the book of Ezra, chapter 1, and read from verse 1 until some.
The book of Ezra, chapter 1, verse 1. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying, Thus say Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah.
And, from there, it was understood that the Most High sometimes deals with the other nations. You can look into Balaam of Balak and Moab in the book of, Numbers. So the Most High has dealt with, probably not himself, but through his messengers, with the other nations on the occasion. Of course, not to our level. So the Most High put it on Cyrus's spirit to allow Israel, our people, our forefathers, to go back into our land and, to rebuild. So that's generally why this particular captivity that we were in was probably one of the more favorable captivities we were in because of this mandate. We didn't really have that in Assyrian captivity, dealing with the 10 tribes, the Babylonian captivity, dealing with Judah, and everyone else that was with Judah, or in the Greek captivity dealing with all the way from Antiochus to even to Rome. We didn't have as much leeway. I take that back. Rome actually did give us a little bit of leeway, minus taxes. But back on point, the Persians allowed us at least to go back home to rebuild, as we read in Ezra. So the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther are all Israelites dealing with descendants of Japheth in this respects, in particular the Persian people. So now I want to get back to some more proofs and articles as far as who do we just read about right now? Cyrus in Ezra. Well, we have actual archaeology of Cyrus himself. Not Cyrus, Darius. Darius is also mentioned later on in the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. But we have evidence from King Darius of the Persians himself saying that he descends from, we'll read it right now, and I'll put the pieces together for you. Boom. So we can switch back to the laptop, and I'm going to Google this really quick. Darius the Great spelling bad. Inscription at Rock of Histon, Nakshe Rose down. Okay, so let's not get Wikipedia. Let's get this one. This is my favorite one. All right, so if the camera's back on us, we're going to read this real quick. I'm going to give you just some background. So this is dealing within the territory of Japheth, dealing with King Darius, Darius the Great, who was again mentioned in the scriptures. This is what he had to say about, his kingship and such. You can read from the top and down. I'll tell you where to stop.
Right. History of Iran. Darius the Great inscription at Nakshe Rockstam. A great God is or a Mazda who created this earth, who created yonder sky, who created man, who created happiness for man, who made Darius king, one king of many, one Lord of many. Verse 2, I am Darius the great king, the king of kings, king of countries containing all kinds of men, king in this great earth far and wide, son of Histaspes, an Armenian, a Persian, son of a Persian, an Aryan, having Aryan lineage.
So right now we have connected the dots. The Persians are Aryans, which are more so Japhetic people before this point in time, dealing with like Tower of Babylon. So, there's sections of periods of time in the Bible. There was a group of people that were Aryans. And, the Aryan people progenerated the Persian people. So that's what we're getting as far as timeline. And this is Darius the Great saying himself. And what did this website say? History of Iran. So check out the chain. Aryans to Persians to Iranians. Isn't it crazy and funny how, names change over time? But that's why we have, researchers and scholars to study places like this. This place is called Nakshe Rostam. And particularly this rock is the rock of Behistan. So all this information is, is available that certain people know, but now it's important for our people to know, and we hope that it's making sense. So when you read about Persian and Medes, think about Aryan people when you read the Bible from now on. The real Aryans, which includes, again, India people too. Don't look at them no different. So that's what I wanted to bring out, dealing with the Persians. I think from right now, we're gonna skip that until later, and we're gonna skip that too. Let's talk into so I think we covered we covered a real good portion up to this point. We don't have all day, but we're going to talk a little bit about the religious practices that Japheth spoke on. So you can put the camera back on me. I don't really have any images to show you more than I could paint with, my voice right here. So as far as the religions of Japheth, right now we just left off of the Persians. So it would be crucial for you to know that the Persians had collectively practice in their empire a religion called Zoroastrianism. Now, Zoroastrianism isn't really one of the common big major religions that you see in the world today. Like if you Google world religions, you're not going to really see Zoroastrianism like in most lists. But at the point in time of the Persian Empire, that actually was what they, that's what they called it as far as what they practiced. That was their title. And I did a lesson probably a couple months back, maybe a year ago, details I'm not going to get too much in, but how that religion was created by influence, and to keep it simple, no different than Islam was influenced by Jews. Zoroastrianism was actually influenced by Israelites as well too, in particular Daniel. There's a lesson that I did where I mentioned that, but oftentimes those things happen, which is ultimately to get the nations kind of prepared to know who the true God, the Most High is. It's just that these other nations typically, they don't serve him correctly anyway, and the Most High did not give him his name to them. So they call him whatever they want, So oftentimes I don't want to say in spirit they acknowledge the Most High because they're not keeping laws, but they do know that there is a supreme God that at one point has proven themselves through Israel greater than all the other gods and practices that we're doing, which is actually what we're going to segue into the other religious practices and spiritualisms that Japhetic people practice. So I want to touch upon some terms really quick. So you have religious terms that modern people call as far as polytheist, animist, and you have shamans. Those are some phrases that kind of codify the way people go about viewing life in their religious and spiritual perspective. And I'm gonna give a sort of hierarchy to it. When you deal with polytheism, you're dealing with religions like Zoroastrianism of the Iranian people, since we're talking about Japheth. You're dealing with Hinduism of the India people. You're dealing with the gods of Greece, the gods of Mesopotamia, yes, but we're not going to really touch on Mesopotamia because I believe Mesopotamians descended from Hamitic and Shemitic people. But, they did the same things too, as far as worshiping other gods and as far as big religious polytheism. They did the same thing too. But I want to keep it in just the perspective of Japheth. The Romans, Jupiter and Saturn, the planets. That's pretty much high culture religion when you deal with polytheisms like that. The next level under it deals with what's called shamanism, which is more of not a collective country worth, but more of a local thing. And that's when people go to a particular man known as a shaman, which is basically your local, the local, as far as Israel would be considered, the local priest for heathens. They would visit a shaman, and the shaman would be the intermediary for the community, the small local community, for getting understanding from certain, spirits or gods and such like that, as far as what they consider echelons. That's shamanism. And then the next level under that would be what's called animism, which is pretty much a thing that the common folk, a lot of folklore, as far as that word comes from, that's what a lot of the common people focus. So that deals with things like, your superstitions, household gods, people believing that every single thing has, a spirit of life in it that can be divined. Everything from rocks to plants to the rivers to, lightning strikes. That's what animism is. Animist people believe that everything has a deep meaning from upper echelons of gods to the physical things of the earth being, powers themselves to some degree. So that's kind of what we're dealing with as far as the religions of that many people can practice, but Japheth practices. So again, we mentioned polytheisms deal with your India and Hindu culture and Zoroastrianism. A lot of shamans deal with, if we can touch on to like Russia, there's a particular people called the Yamnaya culture. And these are some of the earliest peoples of Japheth recorded in modern history. They practice stuff like shamanism and such like that. Even getting into people like the Etruscans of, I believe, the Latin peninsula of Rome, early Rome. They practice aspects of shamanism. The Norse people, like the Vikings, or even actually not them, but the Celtic people, the Celtic people, Druidism. Those are that's what is called that they practice. The Celtic people of Ireland and other eastern parts of Europe. They practice that aspect of shamanism as well too. And as far as animism goes, let's get in. We could touch upon the Han Chinese. So this is something that people need to know as well too. The Han Chinese, the original, or the people we would consider Chinese today, China nationally has a whole bunch of nations and cultures that live within it. China's a really big place, but China initially began from a particular descendant named Han, which was a man. So the ethnically Han Chinese, a lot of them, they practice what's called animism. And that's dealing with, you have your, what I said earlier, not even just your local community, but like an actual family, like, a mom, a dad, the kids and such like that. They would have ancestor worship. That's a part of animism. They would give reverence to their ancestors as well as phenomena that happen around them, such as, believing in the spirits of the forest, the spirits of the lake, the spirits of the river. A lot of the Han Chinese were doing stuff like that. So they didn't necessarily have high paganism like a Hinduism or like a Norse god mythology, or Greek gods and Roman gods. They are more so animism. So again, those three types were sprinkled and spread out within the Indo-European region. Being how it's so big, there could never be, so much of a unity, or I guess a collection of everyone doing the same thing. It's just Japheth being enlarged and such just has so much going on from a state level to rather a federal level to a state level to a local level to a family household level, and how they dealt with their religious practices in their communities. That's what they did. And since we touched upon Asia, I want to drop this line too. We deal with stuff like Buddhism, Buddha, Taoism, that thing with the yin and yang, the circle with the black and white, and even Confucianism. The thing about that is, people have framed those things to be religions, but those are actually what we consider in college philosophies, or even much like a lot of the wisdom books and scriptures like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus. Those are actually more books of observable wisdom to the level of degree that the Most High was dealing with those nations of people. So those books themselves actually don't have inherent fake spiritual practices to worshiping of other gods, other than what people have kind of made them in today. Again, dealing with Taoism and Confucianism, and even some of the principles of Buddhism. A lot of those were writings, just dealings of, were wise sayings that became idolized today. So Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism are not religions in the sake that people don't really offer sacrifices, of food or animals to anyone in particular in those three philosophies or wisdoms. That's again dealing with animism, where like in Japan they have Shintoism, they go to shrines and such like that, and they give offerings to their ancestors or nature spirits. That's more so of the religious aspect that's talking about for Asian people. Those books, obviously, not everything is correct, but there are some wisdoms that we have in our own scriptures, like in Ecclesiasticus, where it says two are set against one against set against another, 2 and 2. Taoism, or the yin and yang, kind of touches upon that and understands how the earth in its natural sense kind of, has opposites that kind of, need to balance each other, night and day, hot and cold. That's what that kind of goes into. So those are more so books of wisdom associated with their culture alongside of their, pagan practices like animism, polytheism, and shamanism. So I just wanted to touch upon that more so as meat for those that are going to be having to deal with our people that are over there in those regions, those Japhetic regions. So yes, dealing with religions. Let's talk about Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Thailand, the Philippines to a certain degree, and other Southeast Asian countries. A lot of them have Hindu and Buddhist practices. That's if you know a map, that's because they're coming from that close to India area. So that's why, places like Cambodia, Taiwan, Thailand, the Philippines, that's why that's more so understood that they practice that over there, because that's part of Japheth's territory. That's part of their region. I mentioned it already, Ireland, Druids, shamans, the Norse people, that's what they do. Greeks, Greek mythology, polytheists, India, Hinduism, the Persians and Medes, again, Zoroastrianism, the Etruscans of Rome, or the Latins, animists, Pacific Islanders. I want to touch upon this for a second, too. I think there's a unspoken saying within the Israelite community, Instagram, social media, such as that, is that Japheth is only the Pacific Islanders. I would argue, according to my research, that's not entirely true. I do believe that Japheth is the face of your Pacific Islanders, like of Samoa, Tonga, Fiji to some degree, Australia, New Zealand, those islands, those are some of the big major islands. And that's because you got to think about the geography. Those islands are really close to Southeast Asia / the borders of Asia and Korea. It only makes sense, and think about Japan in the same sense, it only makes sense that some of them would make their way out into the sea to go and occupy those areas, as well as Israel with them, because again, Israel is scattered upon the four corners of the world, from every major continent to every island. So it all comes to, and actually there's a really good book on Polynesians that I can maybe do a lesson on later, that goes into the social hierarchy that, for instance, people of Hawaii have. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but even the Pacific Islanders in history have had hierarchies of who was on the top, who was the head, and who was on the bottom, who was the tail. Israel and Japheth, dealing with Pacific Islands, deals with that too. But for the most part, the Pacific Islands, yes, that's Japheth territory as well. But that's not all of where Japheth lives. Japheth still exists today in their enormousness in Europe, Russia, India, China, and all that associated Indo-European region. They're still there as well. So I wanted to touch upon that with the Pacific Islanders. And they pretty much practice animism, shamanism. That's what they have historically practiced as far as their religious practices. Two I'm not going to touch into, Armenians and Turkish people, segueing into Ashkenazi people. The Ashkenazi Jews even. The reason why they're called the fake Jews, the reason why they're called Ashkenazi Jews is because, go figure, some of them actually descend from who we read about in Genesis, Ashkenaz, who is a descendant of Japheth. Now again, this is why I mentioned Esau earlier. Esau does intermingle and intermarry with every nation and every culture, so he's definitely up in the mix by face as an Ashkenazi Jew. So it's almost like when we're dealing with Amalek, as we say, when we're dealing with that tribe of Amalek of Esau, he's essentially taken on regionally and face-wise two cultures. He's taken on a Japhetic nature and an Israelite nature. So it's, again, a lot of this stuff is convoluted, and if it's not in your mind to really kind of get this, just take it from what I'm telling you. Take it as what I'm telling you. But this is what the names and the words are proving as far as when we're dealing with these lineages by, piece by piece. Nothing is 100% set in stone as far as what I'm saying, but a lot of this, as far as what we brought out, does have proof and ground on it to it. So, again, the Armenian people, the Turkish people, Ashkenaz, which is, again, in that area of Armenia and such. Those are Japhetic people that have converted to, Christianity, Judaism, in themselves. It's no new thing in our biblical history that the other nations have adopted or converted to our practices, which is called today Judaism. That's not a unheard of thing. So it's just that the scriptures say, I know thy works and thy trials and tribulations of them that call themselves Jews but are not. Esau being the main one, but it's some other nations out here as well, perpetrating as well too. So as far as Armenians are concerned, we live in, we're True Nation Los Angeles, right? So there's actually a section in LA County, it's called Glendale. I recently moved out there. That has a lot of Armenian people over there. They like to, say they had, an Armenian genocide or such like that. And I mean, that's nothing like Israelite genocide, but they play and use that, and they all stay in rich, affluent, and wealthy Glendale with their big old malls and walking around in flip-flops and looking like, for the most part, white people, but a lot of them are just whitewashed, light-skinned Japhetic people. So when I'm over there now and I see that, I'm like, oh, good God, this is them. This is Japheth over here. And Esau as well too, hidden and obvious in the mix. But for the most part of them that identify in that part of Los Angeles as Armenian, that's again who we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that are Japheth. And again, Armenians and Turks generally have converted to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So they kind of forgot their extreme pagan past for a more acceptable and modern pagan present. Let me see if I don't need to touch on that because we're kind of past that point already. I'm gonna just drop it as a reference though. The Minoan people of Greece. Matter of fact, let me just touch on that because we were talking a bit about how Esau, got into the mix of not only our people everyone but Japheth too. But these are pictures of what the Minoans, a Japhetic people of Greece, what they look like. If you want to switch over to the PowerPoint really quick, let me know when you do. But I'm going to keep speaking. You see this image right here? This is actually one of the oldest restored images of the Minoan civilization. Look at these people right here. They have brown skin. There was brown-skinned people ruling that European region, all the way up until the Greek Empire and Roman Empire. And then, to touch on Esau again, Esau puts himself in high society, the arts and cultures, and iconoclasts himself to be these people. That's why, for the most part, when we think about Europeans, we think of Esau, white people. That's you. I mean, yeah, as far as what you can see, what they're showing you, yeah, that's them. That's their appearance, but that's not originally them. Again, these are pictures right here of the Minoans of Greece, Latin area, and what they look like. The original Greeks, even up to the Book of Maccabees. I will tell you that some of these Greek people, if not the foot soldiers, they were actual Japhetic people that were doing the stuff that they did in the Book of Maccabees. I can't tell you as far as when exactly, other than Alexander the Great, because for all intents and purposes, we understand that Alexander the Great, the pictures that we see of him, he was an Edomite, Esau descendant person, one in the upper echelons of society. But the people he was definitely commanding, other than some of the close people, were definitely Japhetic people that looked like this, that looked like, for the most part, people of India. People of India should be a common image of what you think about when you think of pure-blood Japhetic people. People of India should come to mind. And now it actually makes me want to touch upon dealing with some of the meat concerning the 10 tribes of Israel and why you have a lot of division in social media and just common people today, why some people don't think or don't understand and can't put together that Native Americans of North, Central, South America are our bloodline descendant brothers of so-called African Americans of the Atlantic slave trade. This is what you got to understand. When the 10 tribes of Israel went into captivity by the Assyrians, and the Assyrians placed them, as it says in 2nd Ezra, over the waters and such like that, we were put into territory where Japheth was at. The Euphrates River area, other than Mesopotamia being over there, but that was, again, as well, very close to India, very close to Scythia, other areas that Japheth and his many descendants had inhabited. So if our people in Egypt, while in Egypt in captivity, as well as, I think the 400 years when Joseph was in rule and such like that, if our people were intermarrying with the Egyptians back then already, just by being around them, what makes you think that at some point of time, because I can't give you an exact year as far as the prophecy in Ezra says, when the 10 tribes finally decided after who knows how long, hey, let's get out of here. Let's get out of the midst of the heathen. And I'm going to tell you that most of the heathen that they were around were Japhetic people. And what do they again look like? These Minoan people and these Indian people. And this is the dots I want to tie for you guys. This is why a lot of Native American people have some of those looks and similarities to people of India, people of, not the white people of Europe, but Europeans like, these Minoans, for instance. You could check out the hair texture, and Persian people. And even to some degree, just to throw in Shemitic peoples, which they also, our people look like, Arabs. You got to understand, too, a little off subject, Arab people descend from Shemites too. So to some degrees, in antiquity, our people would have looked like Arab or Ishmaelite people too. But again, you got to understand, for the most part, Israel in Egyptian captivity, I'm not going to say everyone, but a good amount was already intermingling with some of the Egyptians, and as well as Judah intermingling with a lot of Hamitic people that were not killed off and thrown out of the land in the book of Joshua and Judges and such like that. So you got to understand these things. Even though the Most High said that we're not supposed to be doing that in particular for certain ones, but even look at Solomon himself, you know, and the many nations of people that he married. So in sin, and as well as by permission by the law, because the law says that if we were to take a woman captive of the other nations, we could marry them. It's just they have concubine status. They don't really have, you know, they don't have the status as a pure blood Israelite woman had. So those are things that we did, and these are things that we kept on doing, and all case in point to say as why Native Americans and as well as why African Americans, why we look the way we look. We have some, you know, intermingling appearance-wise with the other nations that affects how we may look at the physical, but not our bloodline, which is why Paul said in the New Testament, one of the reasons why Paul said, rather, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. We know that righteous judgment involves the Spirit bearing witness. We also know, which should be common sense hopefully now, that righteous judgment also involves archaeology and anthropology. There's countless resources that we're not going to get into that prove that Native Americans of North, Central, and South America were and are descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel. There's a bunch of archaeology that you guys can look into another lesson for that. But I just wanted to make reference to that because it seems like our appearances, and we're human, you know, but that seems to be one of the main causes of divide in Israel, you know, today. So when you have unstudied and unlearned people that are just basing stuff off of, you know, bas reliefs, archaeology, and even just what they see and what they experience on the streets at their job place, dealing with Israelites, you know, Mexicans, Jamaicans, blacks, just like that. When you have people that are uneducated and just going based off their feelings and not truth, you're going to have a lot of people promoting that division. They're like, no, they're not our people. Latino only doctrine, Negro only doctrine. They're not our people. Just based off using as a scapegoat the way they look. You got, you know, thick, long, straightish hair. You're not an Israelite. Well, some of you got kinky, you know, fro-y, afro-y hair that a lot of Hamites, as, you know, the last lesson was put in as well, too. So it's like there's a tit for tat thing. You got to, if you're going to play with one side, you got to play that side as well, too. So that's what I wanted to mention as far as the image that we see right here, you know, of the Minoans and a lot of people that mistakenly may look like the 10 tribes of Israel, but again, are not separate. They're separate, but you got to understand the migrations that the 10 tribes took from the Assyrian captivity to making their ways into the America, and how long they dwelt amongst the heathen, the Japhetic people, for the most part, before coming to the Americas, you know. And anyone else they may have even, you know, took, which is very unlikely because they wanted to get away from them, but with them to the Americas. That's what I wanted to bring out as far as that understanding. And I hope that opens a lot of eyes, you know, to pushing this unity, well, just pushing the word and the kingdom of Christ, you know, forward. So I talked about that. It's We don't have to mention that. You know, we kind of touched under that. There's instances in scriptures, you know, that I have written about the tribe of Dan, for instance. You know, the tribe of Dan doesn't have a gate in the book of Revelations, and that's due to Dan, you know, doing the things that they were doing idolatry-wise, staying in ships. You know, why did Dan stay in ships? It said in Judges. Well, he got assimilated into, you know, a lot of Japhetic region himself too. So Dan, just by blood alone, had been in antiquity amongst the Japhetic tribes since the book of Judges. So who knows how Dan influenced Japheth, and as well as losing themselves during those times. We don't really know, because Dan is one of those tribes that kind of got lost in the sauce and such, to the point to where there's not even a gate mentioned for them in the kingdom, as prophecy says in the book of Revelations. But, you know, that's some information on Dan. Maybe we can get some magnifying glass bird eye lesson on him and his tribe sometime. But that's pretty much, I think that's pretty much it that I want to explain for this, you know, this subject, this history. Khan, I don't know if you know, any thoughts on mine from yourself?
I'm good. You was pretty thorough.
Great.
With the history and facts of showing the proof, so it was good.
All praises to the Most High, you know, it's a practice.
Khan.
Well, yeah, we're gonna leave it there. So again, the history and descendants and religions of Japheth, as far as what the Most High has put on myself and anyone else out in the world, and you know, in Israel at this moment in time. And I'm sure there's more always to be discovered. But we're going to leave you guys with that. This has been a True Nation World History lesson brought to you and sponsored by True Nation Israelite Congregation. Again, my name is Aman Allah.
And I'm Yasharahla.
Khan. And make sure you guys check us out with the other subjects and lessons we do at True Nation, as well as staying tuned, if you like it, Wednesdays, World History. And with that, good night and shalom.
Shalom.